Hi, this is Ola.
And this is Christian.
We can't come to the phone right now because we're recording our podcast.
Leave us a message after the beep. It's our first episode.
It's our first ever episode, our first podcast about everything. Mainly maybe about our relationship.
Yes, it's been a while since we've started dating. Really, we've had these chats normally at 3, 4 a.m. and it's been a while since we've said it might be quite an interesting topic or topics.
Yes.
For people.
Maybe we'll see if anyone wants.
yeah.
But also, it's not just about our relationship, but I think in general how we process the world, love, connections, other people's relationships. Like, I think it's, for me personally, I think it's just like that we can preserve or like in some way archive what we have and our conversations, and maybe just like leave a little something for our kids later.
Yes.
Like, I think it would be really cool for me if like our parents
had
kept videos.
True.
Or even recordings, just sound recordings of what their relationship was like, right?
That's so
back
true.
then. And I don't know, I think it might be nice for our kids later.
Yeah, there's so many. I think until you become older and your parents become older, I think those are the times when you start asking questions and the stories that you never heard.
Yeah.
Until you actually ask those questions to your parents. And I think even for us, it would be nice to see, these videos or the podcasts or chats that we have 10, 20 years time, where we probably would have evolved so much, and see where we were at that moment in time and that period of our life. So I think it would be either way. If it doesn't do anything, it's completely fine. It's really.
We're trying for a baby right now. Well, we're not trying. We're just letting nature do its thing. So we've opened up the doors to having a baby. So I was wondering, is there anything that worries you about being a father?
To be fair, I think in terms of being a parent, I don't think you can really fully grasp that role until you actually are a parent. It doesn't actually scare me as such, because I think I have such great support. I think our relationship, I find it so strong that I feel that, I know loads of people say, we're a team, blah, 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 but I do really feel that it is like a team. So I don't feel alone in doing stuff, decision making and the responsibilities of having kids. I guess I think we're both very similar, that we're quite self-aware.
Yes.
And I think we do already ask questions. I think we are already in the mindset that we can't be perfect, and we're going to try our best to be able to listen to our kids and be able to ask to be on the same page. But I think at the end of the day, they're still somehow going to be a little bit messed up.
We're going to mess them up in some ways, because I think it's impossible not to mess them up. But also, I think we're getting good practice with my brother's kids.
Yes.
With my little brother, we're getting good practice.
Yes.
And even with Anya, even though she's 20-something, like, it's also another age where you can learn to, like, where's the boundaries of what you can and cannot say to them.
Yeah.
And, when she was going to Mexico, I really
terrifying.
wanted to tell her not to go, but also I went to Mexico and I lived there for 3 years. So it's like, you kind of just have to respect them as an adult. And when I went there, I was 28 and she was 25.
Yeah,
so it's close. Like, how can you really say that you knew more than her when you went? And you're also a girl, and and I love Mexico, and I really never felt in any way unsafe there. But I was also very aware that it could get dangerous, so you just have to be cautious. And I don't know why in my head I was like, oh, but if Anya goes, she won't do that. Like, of course she would do that. She's, she's just as aware, and just, so it's kind of an interesting practice already to like having a grown child later and being like, okay, there's a boundary of what you can and cannot tell them to do.
Yes.
And yeah, so
It's as if we've kind of like have all the ages
Yeah.
of from kids to kind of babies to teenagers to kind of
like
young
full
adults.
grown adult, yeah.
In you were saying the fact about trusting someone experience.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how much of your own experience are you going to share to your kids?
To my kids, to our kids.
yeah.
I think if they watch this podcast, then they'll know a lot about my experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think out of the two of us, I think I'm a little bit crazier.
Well, you've experienced
I've
more.
experienced a lot. Like, and I try a lot of things. Like, I generally live with the philosophy that I cannot give in to my fear. That if something scares me, then there's more reason that I should do it.
Right.
Of course, fear is also healthy for things that are dangerous. But if I've weighed the options and I've logically come to a conclusion that my fear is a little bit irrational, then I'll just kind of do it, right? So I generally do try stuff, and I think it will be important to say to our kids, try stuff, but yeah, be cautious. So I don't think I'll hide that much of who I am, because I think it's important for kids. Maybe it depends on what age they are
Yes.
and when you share stuff. But like Anya, she knows everything
Yes.
about my life, and I find it really amazing, and I'm very grateful that she lets me be her friend, even though I'm her aunt. And I know it's not like a usual thing. It's nice that I'm only 8 years older than her, so that gap is not big, so it makes it much easier to be a friend.
But it's still enough experience to be able
Yeah.
to kind of yeah.
And she comes to me for advice, and I also appreciate that, because I know Vietnamese culture can be quite overbearing. So you tend to rebel quite a lot against advice, and you tend to have issues with authority, because
Yes.
you always kind of kept, inside some kind of control thing.
And judgment as well.
Yeah, so it's nice to be able to tell her everything. And I've always told her everything since I was younger. So I think it's like being able to share everything, but not forgetting to also share the conclusions you've come out with. Because, it's one thing just sharing stuff, and then
Yes.
another thing actually trying to give them a free lesson, right? And
Yeah.
it's whether they want to take it, it's on them.
Yes.
But I think that makes sense, right? And I don't think there's anything in my life that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't share that with our kids. Because
Yes.
I think it's all human, and it's all, just living life.
Yeah. I guess it's, you said, tell them stuff when the age is appropriate. So I guess it's kind of like giving them the advice at the point where they are able to process something, and also I think to a point when they're able to also be able to self-analyze. Because I find that if with kids at a certain age, if you went to them and say, yeah, don't worry, I did this at your age, they'll be like, oh, it's validation, it's fine.
Yes.
I can have these experiences now
Yes.
as a young teenager, where I think if you kind of explain to them and wait until you find that they are in a kind of more mature state, I think those experiences also, you don't have to necessarily live them to be able to understand them, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think there's something about humanizing parents. Because I think when you're a kid, you grow up and you kind of think, my parents know everything, right? Because they're the adult. And you always, as a kid, think adults know everything. They know the answers to everything. And there are kids also that will put their parents on a pedestal and just kind of really look up to them. And it also puts a lot of pressure on the parent to be perfect, right? And I think, like, if you speak to your children and you talk about your past mistakes, I think it humanizes you, and it also allows the kid space to make mistakes and know that when they make a mistake, they can come to you.
Yeah, right.
Because you're not expecting them to be perfect. You're not expecting yourself to be perfect. So you're saying, listen, you know, I've lived life and not everything was always perfect, and I've made mistakes too, and I've learned from them as well. And you know, and if you're ever in a pickle, like, I want you to come to me first.
Yes.
Like creating that trust with them, right? That like, we're here, and
Yes.
if they're ever in trouble, I think parents worry, and they sometimes are overbearing or controlling because they worry and they don't want their kids to be in trouble,
Yeah.
because they just want them to be safe.
Yes.
So I want our kids to know, whenever they feel even remotely unsafe or feel in trouble, we're there for them. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it will be. We're not going to judge them. We're going to solve the situation with them, and then together as a family figure out the next steps. And I think like that's important, right? Because I think, yeah, like if you are so scared of saying something to your parents because your parents are going to judge you or shout
Yeah.
at you or whatever, or because they seem so perfect, like, you know, it just creates an unnecessary barrier.
Yeah, there's a barrier, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt, or was there at any time where you felt you could do that with your parents? Or is
No.
it still the same, still the same now?
I think maybe with my mom, it's a bit easier, it's a bit better. Yeah, I mean, okay, wait, no, there's one situation where I think my parents acted in a really amazing way. So you remember I had an abortion when I was younger. I mean, I was in my late 20s, so yeah, if you're watching this, kids in the future, anyway, you know.
It is, yeah.
It is, but yeah, it was you know, near my 30s, so I was then still scared to say anything to my
Yeah,
parents,
of
right?
course.
And I thought about it all the time. I was like, should I tell my dad? Should I not tell? And I actually didn't tell my dad until after the fact, and he came to visit me, and we had a chat, and it was face to face, and I told him, and he cried, and he was like, you know, you have to always tell me what's
Yeah,
going
right.
on with you, because then I can help you. But with my mom, I told her as it was happening, before I decided to
Yes,
even
right.
have an abortion, and I was telling her, and she responded in a really beautiful way. And maybe I kind of feel like I took something away from my dad by not telling him earlier, because maybe dad would have also acted in a beautiful way had I
Yes.
given him the chance
Yes.
to act in a beautiful way.
Right.
So yeah, like mom was like, you know, whatever you decide, we're going to support you, and whatever it is that you know, you move forward with, like, I'm here. And yeah, so I think that's the
pretty
thing that I'd
amazing.
like to give to our kids. I was able to do that with some of my older cousins. I shared it with Anya, you know. So I
Yeah.
had support in the family, but I think like with my parents, there was definitely like it wasn't immediate that I felt, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd like for us to build
Yes.
that space for our kids where they're like, my parents are there for me, and there's no judgment, and there's safety, and we are the voice of reason for them, but not a voice of, you know,
Yes.
judgment and scolding. Like, of course we'll scold our kids because we're parents, but but you know, like
Yeah,
that.
it's a fine line. There was a psychologist that was saying how you need to be the kind of safe space for your kids,
Yeah.
but still have the role of the parent. So you're
Yeah.
not their friend. You're still the parent, and I think that needs to be a pretty clear thing. But so
Yes.
it's a fine line between going too much the other side where
Yes.
the kids take advantage. You know, it's like animals. Once the puppy knows that they're you know
Yes.
the king of the house, then there's nothing that you
There's
can do.
nothing you can do.
So I think it's the same thing where you have to kind of like draw boundaries, but then have that safe space for them to be able to ask advice or just be open.
Yeah.
But I know it's hard. I mean, as a teenager, to speak to your parents, you know, I know probably it doesn't matter how good you have
Yeah.
build that. It's still gonna be. It's still not gonna be the same as them speaking to their friends.
Yes.
But you know, I remember the first time as I was older, you were talking about, um, parents humanizing parents, where my parents asked me for some advice about something, and for a bit, yeah, I was like, oh wait, what? They asking me
Yeah.
for advice, and obviously, I think that's the turning point when you realize as well there's that kind of kid to adult,
Yes.
and sometimes it's like not even, it could be in the 30s, it could be later than that.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, that's quite a conscious thing that comes. I think when you get to a point where you're at the same level,
Yeah.
and I think that's important. I think
But also speaking of like the child and adult shift, right now, at least like especially the last couple of years, like I feel the biggest shift of being more adult than my parents in some moments. And I think with our parents aging, and
I think it's natural.
really,
Yeah.
really hope that they all go to the gym and work out and they
Yes.
have like, longevity. But there's also a physical aspect of it where they turn into kids,
Yeah.
and in a sense that they need more care, right?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting place to be, and like to have that awareness that that's happening, right? And be conscious that there's a shift happening. And I think that's something that I'm hoping we will do, is that we will really try to stay super healthy of mind, sound of mind, and like healthy physically, so that for the longest time possible we can enjoy being adults with our kids.
Yes.
Like, just because I think when that shift happens, when they become adults and we are still capable of being adults physically and mentally, it would just be really fun
Yes.
to spend time with our kids when they want to, and go on like adventures around the world, and just kind of like process life with them.
Yes.
While they're adults and
Yes.
we're adults. Yeah.
It must be tough as well, though, for the parent, especially when they're so independent, to then having to revert back into kind of being taken care
Oh my
of.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I think there's a pride thing involved. Like my dad still drives, and he's 72. Granted, he's a very young 72-year-old.
Yes.
And honestly, like seeing our parents get old, I realized that my perception of age
yes,
completely shifted. Because back in the day, if you told me someone was 70, I'd be like, whoa, that's old.
yes, like,
But like
white
seeing our
hair.
parents, right?
Yeah, it's totally
They're
different.
so young, and it's like, and also obviously it's also like an evolution thing.
Yes.
And humans now live longer, etc. So it's a little bit different. He still drives, and I think he's getting into more and more small accidents. Like where he scrapes the car or does something, and I think it's because your reactions naturally,
Yes, of
mentally, are
course.
slower.
Your vision.
So, I know there's a huge thing for him with driving, that kind of independence, right? Being able to go
Freedom,
somewhere
yeah.
by yourself, and freedom, and I definitely can tell that it's hard to let go of that. So yeah, I can only imagine
Yes.
how they feel, all of them,
Yes.
about certain functions just kind of getting worse.
Yeah, especially when then they're not part of the decision making anymore.
Yes.
Where they, even to go to like the doctor
Yeah.
appointment or the hospital, or just anything that they don't have the freedom anymore to be like, I just gonna jump in the car, go to do my shopping,
Yeah.
go see some friends, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That, or even just take the transport, to go to the bus or the
Yeah.
train. It's definitely kind of I guess for our parents coming towards that age. Luckily, as you say, with how evolution is happening compared to our parents, so to our grandparents.
Yes.
Like my grandparents, my granddad especially. I mean, when he was already 50,
Yeah.
he looked older than my dad.
That's crazy.
It's just kind of like, and I think it's lifestyle, it's diet, it's just,
Yeah.
I think medicine is just everything that's kind of just in those short period of time that well, okay, there's genetics as well, but I think that has helped in how our parents look and feel.
Yeah.
And yes, your dad, your mum, and my parents, they all look
Yeah.
and feel really
Healthy.
young and healthy.
Yeah, and young, yeah. Yeah, I think for my mom, I think for my mom, the struggle has existed for a long time because my brother and I take care of her financially. And I mean, I've been contributing to, taking care of her since my first job, that I had in high school. And I think it's hard for her because it's not just that you're not independent as an adult, because, of many reasons back in the day, they had a divorce, not the right decisions were made, etc. But then to like not be an independent adult and additionally be dependent on your children. I think like obviously when I was, in high school, my brother would have been in his late 20s already because he's so much older. But just, yeah, like I think nowadays she has to call me if she wants to get something done.
Right.
And and it's sort of my decision.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's weird on both ways, I think, on both sides, because I obviously, want her to be completely fine. I want her to get everything she needs and all of that. But it's weird to have grown up with a sense of responsibility like that since you were a kid. And so I think when I was younger and I was more brutal with my parents, because I think when you're like in your late teens, like early 20s, you're sort of not as empathetic, I think, as you should be.
Yeah, the threshold is a lot lower, yeah.
And not as understanding and compassionate. And so I think I when they would make remarks about me having kids, I'd be like, well, what's the point? I already have a kid. And I would say that, and I'm like, that's so like, just feel like it's so mean to my mom and just so, it's just the word I can think of is quite brutal. And she obviously, yes, she made some choices in life, but really a lot of things did happen to her. And so like recently we had a chat in Bangkok where I just really felt like, I just wish my mom didn't have to go through a lot of the things she did go through, and that she could like maybe that we would already be in a place where we could just give her everything she needs, like everything, like in opulence maybe almost, to make up for the times when she just didn't have stuff, and that she could have her independence in some ways, right? And I think the problem is that she's not had her independence for so long that even when we do give her a lot now and she can have independence, she doesn't take it.
Yes.
When so many times we're like, do you want to go on holiday somewhere? Just, don't worry, just spend that money, just go, or like do this or that, and she doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Or when I tell her take a taxi and she's, taking a couple of buses, and it's like, you don't have to do that. Like you can just take a taxi. Like we don't, and she just won't do stuff. And I think it's like, I don't know, like I wish I could understand it deeper, and I wish I could, know what's behind it. I think part of it is that she's worrying that if she does something, it somehow affects us, when, countless times we've told her it doesn't matter, because it's Vietnam, like everything is just do whatever that you want, and she still doesn't do it. So it's an interesting dynamic shift to go from being a child to then being an adult, and then in some cases you sort of become a caretaker of your parents. Yeah.
It's I guess for you as well, the independence of you were saying it's both sides for you and your mum. It's a shift that normally happens later on in life, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, there's things in life that you can't control.
Yeah.
And unfortunate experiences that people go through, that it's hard to process as well as a teenager, because you're kind of thinking as well, like, well, I'm okay and I'm managing to take care of me, and now you. So you kind of like, I think it's pretty normal at that time to have those type of reactions. But also it goes without saying, the stuff that we were talking in Bangkok is that as individuals, we can only control and work on ourselves,
Yeah.
and that goes. That's the same with adults and parents, and everyone should kind of should be able to work on themselves to be able to realize a few things and get unstuck from certain I guess traumas and mentality that you have. But yeah, that must have been pretty tough for you, because the backstory for you is that you left home. Well, you were in a way living with your dad, and money was a big thing for your dad to control you, right? He was a thing where you were staying at home, and I guess your relationship with money back then was still very ambiguous, right? Kind of because you didn't know the amount of work that your dad was doing, but then as soon as you kind of left home, and your dad was like, "Well, I'm going to take off the credit card," you kind of realized how
Credit card, everything.
Oh.
There was no credit card back then. Just take away financial support.
Financial support. Yeah. How did that shift? How did it happen, and how did that affect your mentality? Because that was the same period where you started to work and help your mum financially, right? So it sounds like a lot was going on about leaving home as a. How old were you?
I was 16.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
That's kind of like it's young.
But I think it's like, well, the context of it was obviously that I was finishing high school, so I did I finished high school early. And I was leaving to university, so.
Because you're a brainiac.
So I was going to university, and living in Poland, everyone that goes to university kind of moves out of home, right? Or a lot of people do. And so I was just like, well, I'm going to do what everyone else is doing. But because obviously our family's Vietnamese, it's like, well, you can't leave home because you're a Vietnamese girl.
Yeah.
So you have to get married to leave home. And I was like, what? No, I'm going to leave home because everyone else is.
Yes.
And so I just kind of wouldn't hear of that, right? Because I didn't want to be controlled in any way, as a rebellious teenager. And because there was the aspect of my dad that he liked to be like, well, you either do as I say and then you can stay here and have all the things you have, or you somehow get punished by having things taken away from you.
Which, by the way, is pretty normal from that generation.
Pretty normal from that generation. Yeah. And so when I moved out, it wasn't like I was contributing loads already at that point. Like, my brother was the main person, but I would definitely think about stuff like, I moved from my house into the flat, I showed you in Krakow, on the main square, which cost so much money that, as a really spoiled brat that I was, I didn't know how much money things were supposed to cost.
Right.
I didn't know what's a normal amount of money for an apartment, or how to find one, because no one teaches you that, right? And because my dad was angry with me, it's not like he would have gone through the process with me. It was like, just go out and do your own thing. And I could not have gotten a more expensive place, even if I tried. I realized I had to get 3 jobs on top of going to uni to be able to afford that flat. And also at that point, there was some realization that, gosh, my parents worked really hard to give us the life that we had, because we had everything. Everything, and everything we didn't even need.
Yeah.
And it was their love language.
Yes.
It was their way of making sure we're safe, their way of loving us and making sure that we have everything they didn't have. And so, I think when I was doing those jobs, I realized what a privileged life I had led before that, and how much work goes into giving us the things we had. I used to horse ride, do ballet, play tennis. Every whim we had, it would have just been like that. So when I left and I wanted to go back to, continue ballet school, and I had to ask how much it costs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like it's really expensive.
Yeah.
And that my parents didn't even blink an eye when they were, it's just like little things that your parents do for you that I think when we're younger, we kind of take for granted,
Yeah.
that we don't realize that it is time and dedication and sacrifice on their part
Yeah.
to be able to give that to you. Of course, there's the other side of it, which again, humanizing our own parents. There's the side of it that they're just workaholics. Like my parents are workaholics
Yes.
and they love working. There's that side. So it's not like completely just a sacrifice. But
Yes.
the other side of it is, yeah, they do. And both our parents, sacrifice so much for us. And you only kind of start understanding that once you've come out, once you have to earn, once you become an adult, and once you realize how precious time is and how you divide that time up into doing the things that you care about.
Yeah.